Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Alpha Day, the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Tuesday, June 8, 2021, and the time now is 2 o'clock. Notice for this budget hearing was disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on Friday, May 28th, followed by June 3rd, Thursday, and Friday, June 4th. The committee will hear and accept testimony on Bill 55-36 COR, the fiscal year 2022 Appropriation Act as requested by the Governor, relative to the Office of the Attorney General fiscal year 2022 budget request. I'd like to acknowledge the senators that have joined me this afternoon. We have we'll begin with the Minority Leader, Chris Duenas, Senator Tony Ada, Senator Joanne Brown, and Senator Tello Taidewi. The general rules for this public hearing. Those testifying on behalf of Bill number 55-36 COR relative to the Office of the Attorney General are invited to the panel, and they are the Attorney General, Levin Camacho, Stephanie Mendiola, we got Fred Nishihara, and I believe the other one is Shannon Taitano, am I correct? Or no? Or this is Tony Rose, correct? All right, okay. Shannon is outside. Smart lady. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my letter to the staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. But Ms. Attorney General, you have the afternoon to brief us, okay, and answer questions. Those testifying be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you're done, please remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by members of the committee. Question and testimony shall be confined to the agenda, which is on the budget of the Attorney General's office for FY22. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individuals testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the budget hearing room. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for this proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and may be asked. Actually, they'll be removed from the room. Please state your name and your title for the record. So I'll ask that after the panel has been sworn in, Mr. Levin Camacho, the Attorney General, you would introduce your staff, and then the staff, when you're providing an answer the first time, please identify yourself. After that, you won't have to keep identifying yourself, just the one time, okay? Once you start answering. I'd ask now the Sergeant Arms to please, ask the panel to please rise, and for our Sergeant Arms to please swear them in.
Kindly raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, they all affirm that any and all information they provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, or in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Mr. Chair, they're all under oath. You may proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sergeant Arms. I'll ask now Mr. Levin Camacho. I know you have some slides you wanted to present, and that you go ahead and begin your testimony. And I also advise my colleagues that there were some questions that was asked of the Oversight Chair, Speaker Therese Terlai, that all the questions and answers were provided to you, so via email. So please check your email so that you don't have to ask the same questions because the answers were already provided. Mr. Camacho, if you may begin, sir.
With me today is our General Counsel, Stephanie Mendiola, our Chief of Staff, Fred Nishihara, and our accountant with our office, Tony Roki. And Ms. Mendiola will be giving our opening remarks.
Half a day, Mr. Chair, committee members, senators. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss our $16.5 million budget request for fiscal year 2022. This request reflects a recognition that our economy has hardly begun to rebuild and that our government still faces fiscal restraints. Through the tumultuous year that 2020 was, Team OAG stood committed to serve, and although our doors were physically closed for most of the year, our office remained in operation all year long. We continue to provide essential services to our people, including child support enforcement, victim support, juvenile support, and consumer protection services. We also continue to fulfill essential functions such as prosecuting crimes, representing our government in court, assisting with collections, and advising agencies. While the need for these essential services and functions always exists, it continues to be exacerbated by the ongoing public health emergency. Even through a year shadowed and shuttered by a pandemic, our team achieved notable financial milestones. Our Child Support Enforcement Division, or CSED, processed $2 million more in payments from tax garnishments toward child support arrears in 2020 than in 2019, of which $1 million was processed in the month of May alone. We also completed the RFP to modernize APPROPRIATIONS, a project you all know we've been working on for quite some time. It's CSED's case management system. We've received 2 proposals, which are currently undergoing evaluation. On the administrative side of the house, we were able to add 6 new classified attorneys to our team while remaining within the same budget. We consolidated our process service function into a single process service unit and realized a $2,000 savings in annual fuel costs and over $60,000 in salary and benefits costs. Our consumer protection team's historic litigation efforts have brought home hundreds of thousands of dollars to help understand the extent of the opioid epidemic in Guam, to combat the effects of the crisis on our community, and to aid in other consumer protection efforts. Last, but certainly not least, our collections team, with our $268,000 appropriation in Public Law 34-116, has collected or made current on over $1.2 million in outstanding debt owed to the government over the past 3 fiscal years, amounting to a 477% rate of return. After the year of COVID, we note that $916,000 of our collections were for Guam Memorial Hospital Authority. By the close of fiscal year 21, we are expecting to file on GMH's behalf approximately 130 suits with claims totaling over $350,000. Our dedicated employees have managed to work through this challenging time. With the support of the legislature, we were able to hire 4 retired attorneys to augment our workforce and tackle critical mandates. At least 2 of our retired attorneys have been assisting autonomous agencies through agreements to reimburse our office for the expense of their salaries. We have similar agreements to dedicate assistant attorney generals to agencies such as the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority, which AG Camacho will explain in further detail during our PowerPoint presentation. Our budget has to account for their salaries to meet payroll deadlines while we await reimbursement, which often occurs months later or toward the end of the fiscal year. Our budget submits a conservative staffing proposal to meet the mandates of the people of Guam during these austere times. We remain committed to working creatively to maximize output, to continuing to improve efficiencies in operations, and to maintain quality in delivering services to our people. We thank you for your continued support of our office and hope you will look favorably upon our request. And with that said, if we could get the PowerPoint presentation up, I'll turn it over to AG Camacho.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So just to give an organizational overview of our office, we do have 8 divisions, which are identified above. Over half of our staff is within the prosecution division and the child support enforcement division. Next slide, please. So of the 199 staff we have at the Office of the Attorney General, 110 of them are in 2 divisions. Admin and solicitor are the 3rd and 4th largest with 24 and 18 staff respectively, with consumer and litigation having 17 and 14 staff, family having 10, and general counsel having 6 employees. As you can see, 58 of our staff are attorneys, and I would say that we have a very experienced office with only 10% being younger than 30 years old. Next slide, please. So, as Deputy Attorney General Mendiola explained, we remained fully operational throughout the public health emergency. And one of the things that we are proud of is that we moved to G Suites in March of 2020 prior to the public health emergency starting. We have been able to streamline efforts to contact our office. We now have dedicated phone numbers for each of our division. We have dedicated email addresses for each of our divisions. And although we have made these efforts, we understand the public sometimes has difficulty getting through. We did an assessment, and our child support division alone received over 100 calls per day from January through April of this year. You'll notice here that our prosecution division remained open and they continue to file. We are tracking in FY21 the same number of criminal cases as the prior year. Our victim services has remained relatively status quo. One of the new things that we did with our retired attorney, we were able to hire a dedicated hearing officer for PUA, and he has single-handedly heard or processed 436 appeals. Our litigation division has been extremely busy with the pandemic, with 40 cases, whether they're quarantine or other litigation matters, being pandemic related. During the public health emergency, we received and investigated over 180 reports of price gouging. Next slide, please. Are we okay? Just to give an idea of some of the financial impact we've had in the return, our child support division, as was mentioned, collected over $11 million last year, and $4.2 million was garnished, which represents $2.8 million in the prior calendar year. Our consumer protection division was also able to secure the largest non-tobacco consumer settlement of $289,000, every dollar of which is going towards combating the opioid epidemic. We have collected quite a bit, and the financial impact is hard to tell with these agencies because there was a policy decision to hold on collection matters, except for those that were necessary to be filed in order to preserve the statute of limitations. So next slide, please. We have agreements with 11 agencies, 7 of which have a dedicated assistant attorney general, and we've put an asterisk next to 2 of those, the Department of Labor and Guam Solid Waste Authority, because they have the benefit of 2 retired attorneys that we were able to staff for their office. Next slide, please. Now, one of the challenges that we have as an office is we have these MOUs with agencies, and in the interim, all salaries are paid out of the general fund. As you'll notice here for FY20, the rate that we invoice and the rate that we get paid often lags. And to give an example, the deadline to submit any requisitions above $25,000 was June 25th of 2021. And you'll see from the graph, we received the bulk of our reimbursements for MOUs after the deadline to do any large procurement. August 27th, 2021 was the deadline for any small purchases, and again, the bulk of our payments were received after the deadline to use those funds had already run. We've been better in 2021 and more aggressive with collecting our MOU, and with the Guam Department of Labor PUA attorney, we've been able to secure, so we're able to get paid a little bit quicker. But we are projecting much higher in our amounts to be billed to agencies. And the reason why this becomes a factor, next slide please, is that we have been able to use our carryover authority, which was given last year, to fund all of our operations except for the child support APPROPRIATIONS match. Our FY21 appropriation covered salaries and benefits, rent, and local match for our maintenance of our child support system. All of our supplies and equipment were used and paid using our carryover authority. We have spent approximately $834,000 out of our FY20 carryover, which is represented by the gray area, to cover the rest of our operational costs. Without carryover authority last year, we would have been short approximately $440,000. 2 of the projects that are represented in the capital outlay were one-time costs. One was to purchase 3 vehicles to replace older vehicles driven by our investigators. We also used some money, so that was already completed. We also purchased cubicles for office spaces that did not have social distancing or barriers between employees, and that is expected to be completed by the end of the summer. Next slide, please. For our proposed, you see the bulk of our budget is for personnel, with contractual making up, I believe, the next highest amount at 10%. But if you could please go to the next slide. So in the budgets that we provided in the digest, We went based off of our authorized, but we thought it would be a better picture to give in terms of how much it actually costs to run our office through FY21. And the two biggest changes you'll notice there would be for contractual, which we see a 29% increase or $490,000. And the bulk of that is $190,000 that it's going to cost to move our case management system for prosecution, which is going to be discontinued by the end of this fiscal year, and that's going to be approximately $200,000. The annual cost of Justware is $85,000, so it's approximately $300,000 total to run our prosecution case management system. We've also allotted $50,000 for a special prosecutor, $45,000 for expert witnesses, $30,000 for prosecution training, which would include homicide training or other training that would benefit law enforcement, and $11,000 to renew interpreter contracts. Next slide, please. So the next largest change from actual FY21 to proposed FY22 is in our staffing. And the way that we've been able to get by this year is we have approximately $400,000. Well, we have several employees who are on military leave that we haven't had to pay. So our projection for next year assumes that they have returned back on island and we will be responsible for paying their salaries. It also includes the LTA attorneys or the retired attorneys. And we have to assume that we're going to pay them 100% for the entire year. And then we have vacancies representing 1.7%, I believe 1.7%, which are 2 employees, 1 attorney within our consumer protection division and 1 program coordinator within our child support division. But again, the budget request, 93% of it, well, actually 96% are just warm bodies and those who are on military leave currently. Next slide, please. We did not receive any direct CARES Act funding, and we have had some discussions about the potential for hiring attorneys to assist with ARP funding, but we do not anticipate any other funds from any other federal funds. And next slide, please. That completes our PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you, Attorney General, Mr. Camacho. I'd like to also recognize the Oversight Chair, Acting Chair, Senator Sabina Paris is also here with us today. Attorney General, are you aware, you're probably aware of this, that this body, the 36 Guam legislatures, is requesting the governor to give you $4 million in ARP funding. You're aware of that, right, Fred or Mr. Camacho? It's $4 million is what the Guam legislature is asking, and it's to improve the parents' access to child support information, payments, enforcement through investment in child support and enforcement division case management system, and to integrate the databases with GPD to for better collaboration and data sharing. I know that's going to help you folks if we can get the governor to support our request to provide you additional funding. I have very few questions. Actually, you answered quite a few of them, so you're making it a lot easier for me. Does your current request for FY22 meet all your requirements? That's one of the keys.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
They do. Do you have any prior obligations that you need to pay off, or you're able to pay it off with your 2021 budget?
We have nothing outstanding.
No outstanding. Even better. Like I said, you're making it quite easy. You know, you mentioned quite a few of your cases here, and I know my colleagues will be asking that question, so I'm going to leave that to them, and I'll ask, and I know that all my colleagues were provided a copy of the questions posed by the Oversight Chair, Speaker Therese Terlai, and the answers were given. So I'll ask the Acting Chair, Senator Sabina Paris, do you have any questions for the panel or any comments for them? Senator Tello, do you have any questions, or ma'am?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the Attorney General's office for providing your proposal for your budget. It was done very nicely. I appreciate the questions too by the Oversight Chair, Senator Therese Chalahi. There is a question though I have with regards to one of the questions she asked, which was based on the FY 2021 Budget Act, and have you procured the majority of budget supplies and equipment for the year? And your response was N/A, our FY21 appropriation did not include the budget for supplies and material. Is that true to form? In FY21, we did not?
Our FY21 authorized was enough to cover rent, salaries and benefits, and essential contractual for our child support. When the legislature gave us carryover authority, we were able to use our lapse from FY20 to pay all other operational expenses, which would include supplies and equipment.
So it says here that we've relied on our carryover, like you mentioned, the authority to fund our supplies in the amount of $70,299 and the equipment in the amount of $118,120. That's a total of $188,419. And as you look over at your budget request on supplies and materials and then office equipment, you're looking at only about $54,000 for supplies and materials and equipment. Is that correct? FY 2022?
So the question is whether or not our FY22 request is for less than what we paid this current year for.
I'm sorry, say again, Mr. Attorney General. How much are you requesting for in supplies and materials and equipment combined?
It appears we have requested approximately $53,000 for supplies and equipment.
Yeah, about 54,000, right? But then in FY21, you spent 188,414 based on this question that was asked of you because you used your lapses, even though you were not appropriated that amount of money, that you used your lapses to cover it. That's 188,000. That's totally different from what you're requesting for FY22, which is only 54,000. Is there a reason why it's such a drop?
I guess. She's saying that the response. So again, the question is why have we requested less in supplies and equipment for FY22 than we did for FY21?
Yeah, why is there such a drop yeah. In your response to Speaker Chalahi, the Oversight Chair, you responded by saying that you used the carryover lapses and the amount in $70,299 and the amount of 118, which is a total of 188,419. So there is a big difference. I just want to know what changed.
Yes. So last year, we made significant upgrades to our IT infrastructure, and that's where the increase would be for FY21.
For IT infrastructure?
Yes.
Okay, and you don't need that this coming fiscal year?
The strategy, Senator, was to try to do more purchases where we'd own outright instead of doing more subscriptions. So an example would be we upgraded our rack servers for our networks, and that cost $60,000 as a one-time. The cubicles also were included as a supply and equipment, although we've talked about it in terms of capital outlay, but that was another significant IFB that we had last year. So a lot of it was tech. That was a single purchase for supplies and equipment. But I believe our supplies, we've gotten down to the $50,000 that was requested for FY22. A lot of the work that because we are moving more remote, we've tried to strengthen our technology infrastructure. So there was a lot of investments FY21 to do that.
Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you. If I'd like to reserve, I might have something for later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tittle. Senator Brown, do you have any questions or comments for the panel?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For once, the order works out for you today. Just in sequence. I know you like to go in sequence. I wanted to ask Attorney General, I noticed you have, and I just assumed that these are retired attorneys that you had come back to the Attorney General's office that are unclassified. You have 8 unclassified attorneys altogether, I assume, including yourself. How is that working out for you?
The retired attorneys have been, I'd say, they've met a very critical need. So retired attorney Ken Orcutt is dedicated to Guam Solid Waste Authority. And this was actually at their request because they basically indicated they are not able to pay and hire a private attorney. So we were able to enter into an MOU with them. They had worked with Ken Orcutt, who's a previous Deputy Attorney General, and he was responsible or very involved in the receivership. So they were familiar with his work. And I believe that's worked very well.
And under those, do you have any department or agencies where they actually fund the cost of the assistant attorney that in the past, I mean, I know when we started APA, that was one of the things we started back, 30 plus years ago, where we had that arrangement with the Attorney General's office to have an attorney sign full-time because they were an enforcement agency. So we had our formal agreement, and then that attorney was assigned to us, but our agency budget would essentially cover the pay through the AG's office. We'd reimburse the Attorney General's office for their work, so it wasn't something taking out of your existing budget. Do you still continue to have arrangements like that in other GovCom agencies, or is the pay actually just coming out of your budget versus the respective department or agency that they're assigned to?
I believe that so we have a dedicated attorney to DPW who we have an MOU with, and it's on a reimbursement basis. And we also have a similar arrangement with Guam EPA. But I believe for those who have federal funds that they rely on, that's often why there's a delay. We obviously can't wait to pay our employees until we receive the funds.
Okay.
So if you've noticed in the MOU chart, Guam EPA is a very good example where we still have 40,000 plus outstanding from FY20 because of the change in fiscal year. We received approximately $80,000 after October 1 that was invoiced during FY20. So we do have these arrangements, but again, it's sometimes getting the money, if we get it at all, we get it so late in the fiscal year we can't do anything with it.
But I assume you're going to follow up to make sure you do get the reimbursement, particularly if it's federal. I mean, it adds to your financial resource. Altogether, it indicates you have, in addition to the 8 attorneys combined, you have 17 unclassified employees.
Yes.
What are those other, I see victim advocates, but what are those other positions? Because it's unusual in a department or agency. Normally it's the director, the deputy, maybe a private secretary, and that's the extent of those that are unclassified.
I believe the advocates are 10 standing alone.
Okay.
Myself, I would be unclassified. I believe we have the retired attorneys would also be unclassified. The legislature was able to, 2 years in a row, give us senior law clerks, which we've been able to recruit and actually beef up our prosecution division. So those are other examples of unclassified employees, but the majority of those are advocates.
Okay. I see too in your budget, you did fund for drug testing for $1,300 or so. Is that for the entire AG's office?
That would be, yes, for our office.
Okay. I mean, I'm sure you'll use your discretion in how to use it. I'm just following up with government department and agencies because when we had a hearing a couple of weeks ago with the Guam Police Department, we were finding that, some of them hadn't been tested since they were recruited and became police officers, which is a little concerning at a time, and I'm sure you're more aware of it than we are up here, of the drug problem that we have on Guam. It's our hope that all our public servants are drug-free with regards to illegal drugs, but the reality has told us differently. So, I mean, any step we can take to ensure that our public officials under granted designated positions, even though I've heard many different interpretations of the AG's position with regards to drug testing in the government of Guam. Some have tried to rationalize that drug testing can't be done at all on an employee. And we do know that there's a process under which that can be done, but certainly it can be done definitely on designated positions. And then, if something shows evidence that the head of a department may determine an employee needs to be tested. But I appreciate that you have that with regards to your funding. One other thing that I wanted to ask, is you certainly did provide a very clear presentation of your respective divisions and their responsibilities, but it's come up in the time that I've been back with regards to prosecuting environmental violations. I do know that there's legislation they're looking at, and the conservation officers have talked to me about it with Department of Agriculture, of issuing now tickets because they've been concerned about the lack of prosecution activities. I mean, they do these arrests and they go through that whole process. They have to do the formal paperwork and everything, and then they feel kind of at the other end where enforcement action needs to be taken through the Attorney General's office. It's not as expeditious a process as they would like to see, or to show essentially our community that if you do these things, there's consequences to it. And I don't know if it's because, of course, I understand your workload and you have to juggle your priorities, but I just want to see a little more with regards to that, because I'm assuming even if we do put these tickets into place and issue, people tickets for environmental violations, I'm sure by the second or third offense, I think as a community, we'd like to see action taken to discourage others in the community from doing those kind of violations. And the other thing I was not as aware of, but in talking with the conservation officers, they brought up the fact that sometimes drug-related activities is connected to some of these, poaching and other illegal incidences that are happening out there in our environment. I never, really thought about it, but when they sat and explained, I said, gosh, wow, I didn't realize all that was going on in our community. Sometimes illegal hunting and other things to be able to access, cash, to do other things that we would not be so pleased with. I just want to get your feedback on that, since I have the opportunity to ask you that during this budget hearing. Where are we with that, so that we can send that message out that when these violations occur, that there's consequence to it? Because a lot of people think when they come up against the government of Guam, it's like, they'll get around to it when they get around to it, and I'll get away with it while they're still waiting to get around to me. So I just wanted your thoughts on that.
I will say that one of the other Guam EPA has a dedicated assistant attorney general, but one need we've been able to fill through the use of the retired attorneys is to be able to offer a hearing officer. And actually, before coming here, we just fielded 2 requests from Guam EPA to assign a hearing officer to conduct basically a violation hearing and to give the violator due process to ensure that their rights are going to be protected. During the pandemic, we had another similar request where we're prosecuting as assisting Guam EPA, and the Guam EPA employees are way more familiar with the environmental regulations than anyone can pretend to be, so they're able to prosecute these mostly on their own. But it just, when there's a mechanism that requires AAL type or an administrative judge, we are now in a position where we can provide that type of assistance. So I'd say it's something we've really pushed this last year and trying to make that available to more agencies.
Okay. Well, I certainly look forward to hearing more of that, because, over the years, we understand and of course, the more serious, heinous crimes that are happening in our community, by all means. I know our public, as we do, we want to see those issues addressed, and certainly the guilty parties, we definitely want to see all measures of the law put into place to address those that have violated or harmed people in our community. But unfortunately, these areas, the environmental side sometimes, and definitely the natural resource, kind of gets put on the back burner, and I just want to make sure we're not losing that. And as time goes on, we're getting a community that's becoming far more conscientious about these issues and wanting to see, more so to discourage. People think enforcement is intended just to be harsh and hard on everybody, but I kind of look at it as a mechanism to discourage. If people know their consequences, they're less likely to keep going down the same road. With regards to these type of violations in our community. So I look forward to hearing more about this with regards to these attorneys being assigned to help facilitate. And then I also don't want our law enforcement to become discouraged, with regards to doing their side of their work, and they're bringing these cases forward, doing these arrests, and then feel like they're left hanging. And that's the impression I'm getting. They're kind of feeling like we're left hanging at our end. We were out in the jungle late at night, and we're catching these people, and maybe we confiscate their hunting equipment, their car, or whatever, but then we don't see anything beyond that, and these cases just sit. And certainly we'd like to see something. One thing I also want to ask, just because it's come up, and I know you can't talk about any specific case, but I've had a complaint about this come to my office a few months ago, and I won't get into it much because we're in a budget hearing, but on the issue of restraining orders. And I know at a later date, Mr. Chairman, I definitely want to explore this issue more, but I'm hearing that issue of concern, not just because of this most recent incident that has happened, but just the process of how, and I'm sure probably AG Camacho, I'll probably give you a call at another time to have that discussion with regards to enforcement of restraining orders, because I've had individuals that are victims of circumstance and they've gotten restraining orders at the court, and they feel that the government, either through the AG's office or through the Guam Police Department, are not as responsive in their circumstance when they encounter someone with which they have a restraining order against and it's violated, and they just feel further victimized. So it's a separate issue, but I'm just bringing it up because obviously the most recent incident has come to mind, even though I understand it's something we can't discuss here.
I can just clarify a little bit. So once a criminal case is initiated, there's typically a stay-away order that's part of the criminal case. Protective orders are handled a little on the civil side. So that would be, the court has set up pro se kiosks that people can go and apply for protective orders. I believe Guam Legal Services and Micronesian Legal Services also can assist people who want to seek a protective order. But usually that's going to be kind of run parallel to criminal
Yes.
proceedings.
Yes.
The violation of a protective order does become an offense, and that could be charged out. But in terms of the enforcement and obtaining the protective order itself, that's handled on the civil side, not through our office typically.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. I certainly probably will discuss just to get more information, because I think as a community, and again, in my time back, my short time back in office, it's come knocking on my door, and I certainly empathize with anyone who's in a situation where they feel their personal health or safety or their family may be at risk, and just wanting to feel that there's some comfort of response, that, you know, these orders actually can be enforced and that they actually have a means of protection, because otherwise not everyone's walking around armed, you know, and having to protect themselves or their family. But it's just making sure that the judicial process and the legal process is working to protect, you know, our responsible citizens in our community. But thank you, I appreciate you elaborating on that.
And I will say that I'm familiar with several cases that we have filed charges and prosecuted individuals for violating a court order, which is a separate, again, offense in addition to the original case.
No, I appreciate that, because I'll, like I said, I'll at another time give your office a call and we can further discuss that. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Tony Ada, and before you begin your questions, I'd like to recognize also my Vice Chair, Senator Amanda Shelton, has joined us. Senator Tony Ada, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. AG, and to your staff, thank you for being here and presenting us with your budget. I just have a couple of questions. I was looking over the Consumer Protection Division, and I think that, you know, you guys have your cases that you guys move forward in keeping our community protected against price gouging and things like that. Have you guys fielded a lot of calls during this past year about price gouging, whether it be it at the supermarkets or different hardware stores, or even price gouging against the government of Guam, where I recall that one healthcare agency was in here for their budget request, and they did say that, you know, the face masks have went up in cost tremendously, and I said, perhaps maybe that's something the AG should look at, because we are still in a declared public health emergency. So I'm not sure where or if you guys have looked into that or not.
Yes, Senator, we received 182 reports of price gouging. It's slowed down kind of as the year progressed, but early on we did receive a lot. I believe food items were the biggest complaints that we received for price gouging, followed by masks. Mm-hmm. We would, and again, it's kind of hard to put your mind back into June of last year, but our investigators, we sent them out to investigate and to go to these stores and to verify. And I believe we issued a few warnings, but for the most part, like we had a couple cases where there was a sale on a product, then the public health emergency happened, and then they resumed back to normal price, and we went out and we kind of looked at their ledger, and they were able to justify it wasn't gouging, it was returning back from a sales price to normal price. But our investigators were extremely busy, and our Consumer Protection Division, again, they were open throughout the entire public health emergency.
How about for our government agencies that procured face masks, PPEs, air filtration systems, things like that?
I don't believe
No complaints have been submitted?
Complaints. No, Senator, not that I'm familiar with.
And I hope that, you know, we continue to look into that as, you know, the year progresses, and contracts will be going out there for procurement of such items, right, as we move forward. And we have $630 million that we need to spend, and, you know, we want to make sure that we're getting every, you know, the value for the dollar and what they procure.
Right. I think Fred was just clarifying that everything's by bid, so it's very hard to identify an example of price gouging if we're following the procurement process.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, it's because, especially like with the emergency procurement or sole source procurement, right? We had that listing a while back on sole source and emergency procurement. We were just astounded by the, $35,000 boat-shaped conference table. So, and things like that, I'm not sure, but maybe things that we keep an eye on to ensure that the taxpayers' dollar are being spent wisely. The other issue I had, I'm not sure how it falls under because I don't see it under your budget digest. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. Where are we at with the medical examiner?
I'm glad you asked. So I know, I don't want to say I've become the face of this issue, but I'm the chairperson of the Post-Mortem Commission, but I don't have any oversight authority or supervisory authority over the Chief Medical Examiner office itself. We've been assisting them in the absence of the Chief Medical Examiner. And in terms of our recruiting efforts, we've been able to, we currently have the services, and this is one of the benefits of an MOU with GMH. We were able, previously we were having to rely on a Dr. Dotterman out of the NMI to fly out every 2 weeks to perform non-forensic autopsies. We were able to enter into an agreement right before the pandemic hit with GMH to allow their doctor to perform non-forensic autopsies, which has reduced significantly the amount of time that you can wait to get it. For our forensic pathologists who fly in from Hawaii to Guam, we have now added one more doctor, an MOU with them, who, as needed, will fly out to the island. I believe we've had pretty solid success with the average time being 2 to 4 weeks in order to perform a forensic autopsy, but that's the current situation. I just signed off on a request to put out an ad back on the National Association of Medical Examiners to recruit, but I can share that this is not a problem unique to Guam. Jurisdictions all across the country are dealing with a shortage of medical examiners. I think I was reading there's 4 times the number of dermatologists than there are medical examiners in the country. So I know that this is something that we're going to try to work with our partners. And the National Association of Attorneys General just received a grant to develop more and to train up more forensic pathologists because it is such a huge, it's $1 million grant to train more forensic pathologists. So we're aware of the issue. We're continuing our recruiting efforts, and once we can secure a candidate, we are going to assist them in doing that.
So
and Senator Fred Nishihira, Chief of Staff. I would be amiss if I did not mention the fact that our grants team and my staff, because we oversee a particular grant for the medical examiners, we're able to do outstanding procurement. We've been able to buy them new cars as well as new equipment, and that's it's not in the process. We've already purchased some of those things for the medical examiner's office. So since you brought it up, I want to give a shout out to my team because and the grants team, they've been working extremely hard doing that.
But I don't know if Johanna, who's the staff that's kind of the backbone of the medical examiner's office, she's been asking for more assistance on the administrative side. It's a 2-person shop right now, and I know with budget it's very tough, but to the extent that they can get more assistance, I would make the pitch on their behalf to add more administrative support for those folks there.
Thank you. Now that Fred Nishihira brought it up with federal grants and such, is there any federal grants that you guys have applied for, have received that requires continued program or continued where you started a program or you picked up personnel and the term of the grant is coming to an end and now it has to be picked up by your office budget?
At this point, the closest would be for our advocates. The bulk of our advocates are paid through VOCA funds, which is a grant, we've seen reductions in. The other would be VINE. Our victim notification system is a grant fund that I believe we have funding through another year or so. But at some point, we want to have those types of services, be able to pay for them and not have to rely on the federal funds. But in terms of other staffing, I don't believe any cut in federal funds would require us to reduce staff or would eliminate positions.
Okay, that's great to hear. On the chief medical examiner, do you think that perhaps maybe a change in the law is needed so that we can have a medical examiner instead of a chief medical examiner? I mean, what are your thoughts?
I know there's been some talk about eliminating the request or the requirement for a forensic pathology degree, and I honestly think that would be a big mistake because we would be paying someone essentially the equivalent salary, and we would still have to have contracts with pathologists to fly in whenever there is a criminal homicide. So, you know, I understand it's very difficult for us to recruit and to hire, but I'd be willing to explore other options we would have. It's just there's always going to be a need for a forensic pathologist. One additional expense, and not part of the medical examiner budget, but not only do we have to pay them to come out and perform the autopsies, our office now, as part of prosecution, has to pay when they fly out to testify at trial, which is an additional expense. And again, once you start adding it up, it goes much higher than the $225,000, I think, is the salary that's being advertised for the medical examiner.
Yeah, I think we need to look at all options, right, and ensuring that the funding is intact and able to keep supporting what's going on right now, you know. Just one last question. Your office rental space, I think it's at 44,000 plus or minus square foot, and you're paying $1.2 million. Have you ever thought about building your own office space? And
If you would include that in this year's budget request, we would be more than happy to take it. I know that is the big item, is the 1.2. We'll be going out for procurement for office space probably within the next year, and we hope, you know, if we could own a building or if there was a place for us to go, that would be great. But I know the difficulties for us is we do have 200 employees. Parking is always a huge obstacle for us. So we would welcome a new building for us to move into, or even an old building, but a building of our own, so we could put some of that back into other categories.
how long have you guys been at the ITC building now?
7 years.
7 years, and so at the moment, $8 million now that we spent there. Yeah, so something to consider in the near future about, you know, perhaps having your own office building and, you know, stop renting at 1.2 million a year. But thank you very much. I appreciate you all being here. Thank you for all your hard work that you continue to do for the people of Guam. You know, keep us safe, keep us protected. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's the only questions I have.
Thank you, Senator. And on that same note, Mr. Attorney General, because Gita's in the same building with you, reach out and ask them how they can help you finance to build your own building. $1.2 million, maybe 1.3 next year. In the 7 years, that's almost, you're closer to $10 million now.
I would say the next time we're stuck in the elevator with them, then we'll bring it up as an opportune time, but I don't want to jinx myself when we go back to the office, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, sir. Senator Duenas, do you have any questions or comments you want to pose to the panel?
Jesus Masi, Mr. Chairman, and maybe if they get some award as well on their the recent success in the Supreme Court, I want to congratulate you.
Thank you.
Great job your team did in supporting the team out there that brought that argument forward, General Camacho. I like to think, you know, we had a healthy debate here on the floor on a measure concerning the environment, and many of us stood up and I think we spoke it into existence. We said, we know the Attorney General is going to win in the Supreme Court over the dump case. So good job with your team once again. And I know it's a long way to go, but it's a great victory. I only have two questions, just because you had a very excellent presentation. You know, pretty straightforward. Was your budget done in concert with BBMR, or are you operating this request as an independent office?
We did this as an independent office.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure that your request isn't subject to any ceilings or impositions of that nature. And so I guess along that line, so do you have a full allotment control within your office?
I believe we have it by statute. That's my understanding, Senator. Yes.
So you're not subject to having to be concerned about whether or not you receive your allotments?
I know that was an issue my first quarter in office, and I think we were able to resolve it with BBMR, and we were to remind them that under the law we're not subject to that.
That's good. I think that's one of, you know, operating as an independent office, you know, you're elected by the people and you got to do a job, and I just wanted to ensure that you remain independent in that area because, of course, finances are the constraint sometimes. So my final question is, because there's a lot of different reasons, of course, surrounding prosecution division and prosecution in general. You know, when the public has thoughts, concerns, the like. I just wanted to make sure we put this on the record here. In your budget request, there's no issues within the prosecution division in terms of you're staffed up properly with attorneys and the like to be able to take full prosecution on all matters that you take to prosecution?
We currently have 18 attorneys within our prosecution division, and the court is restructuring a bit, and so they've actually consolidated the criminal calendar with 4 judges, which is going to help us tremendously, versus 7 we were having to staff. So our optimum number of prosecutors has at some point we're going to get there. They kept all their pending cases, but the idea is that they're going to consolidate the criminal calendar within those 4 courtrooms. And one of the things that we're currently recruiting, our prosecution division does both trial work as well as appellate work, split with our civil litigation division. So we're hoping to recruit another 1 to 2, maybe even 3 attorneys that will take the appellate work off of our trial attorneys, so they're not having to worry about the appeals and they can focus just on taking matters to trial.
That's
so
great.
Our 18 is I would say, with the idea that we're going to take the appeals off of the prosecutors. 18 is a fair number. I think our chief prosecutor Basil would say we could always use more, but we're at a comfortable number right now.
That's great to know, General. Like, I just think that we'll never want to pit any division against any other division. Of course, everything's important, consumer protection, and all the great questions my colleagues have asked. I just think in this, particularly in this environment, there's a lot of sensitivity right now with our severe drug problem, epidemic, and all the crimes that are taking place, some very heinous in nature. And so I just think our public wants to constantly feel reassured that that's something that our Attorney General's office is very well staffed up to and ready to go out there and take it to the folks who would perpetrate crimes against our people and against our community. So I just wanted to lend that opportunity for you to once again reassure the public that you have the manpower, the resources, and everything else to take full authority there when you need to go out and prosecute the bad guys.
If I could just take an opportunity, I know that the court had previously submitted some bills, and I believe the magistrate judge bill was passed into law, but there are a few other bills that we are experiencing a significant backload with criminal cases because we weren't able to go to trial during the public health emergency. We resumed trials in January of this year, and I don't exaggerate when I say we basically had 2 to 3 rape or serious crimes in trial probably until this last week. So our prosecution division, they've been extremely busy picking juries, but the speedy trial issue is going to come to a head, and we want to flag that. At some point, we're going to need to figure out a way for us to manage the backlog of cases, as well as respect the rights of the defendants to get to trial in a timely manner. So I just remind the legislature that we did support the judiciary's request for that package of bills.
I'm glad you brought that up, General, because actually it seemed to be one of the strongest themes of the judiciary when our Chief Justice came down and made that presentation to us as well. So we're certainly aware that there are some systemic issues, particularly with regard to results of the COVID matters and other procedural issues. So thank you once again for your presentation, and of course we stand ready to help you where and when we can. And I want to thank your team also for a very nice, detailed response, to the Oversight Chair's questions. And so I think we have plenty of work with here to make sure you get what you need and keep up the great work with your team. Thank you. Zusmasi, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Dueñas. Senator Perez, do you have any questions?
Suzus Masi, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to Attorney General Camacho, Deputy Attorney Generals Nishihara, Stephanie Mendiola, and I didn't catch the last one.
Tony Ruki from he's an accountant with our administration division.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your presence today, and thank you for your presentation. And I just also want to commend you on such success on the high-profile cases, the Supreme Court, and your leadership in the opioid case, as well as the PFAS lawsuits, litigation as well. So, yeah, thank you for all your hard work. I just have a couple questions regarding perhaps the amount of work that the AG takes in procurement. How many FTEs do you think is required to kind of oversee a lot of these procurements that are coming through your office?
So we received a request to review over 350 contract MOU types of documents last year, our solicitor division. There are 13 attorneys. 2 are dedicated to procurement, and then we have a few that kind of split their time between procurement and other solicitor matters, such as Civil Service Commission types of hearings and other litigation. DPW has a dedicated assistant attorney general, and he handles all of their procurement. But that is probably our biggest need and the hardest in some respects because, as you know, getting agency requests, getting opinion requests, it puts Deputy Attorney General Espadon in a position where he has to figure out how he's going to allocate his resources. So that's another one of the divisions that we're hoping to build out. But procurement just takes a while to learn, and we have a very strong team with Jessica Toft and Laura Mooney, who are 2 dedicated procurement attorneys. Matthew Wolf does some, Rob Weinberg. So everyone kind of dabbles in procurement, but to answer your question, we need more dedicated procurement attorneys, but we currently have 2 full-time and 3 to 4 that are part-time but assistant in procurement. We only get involved from the beginning for anything above $500,000. So there's this idea that we are responsible for all the government's procurement, and as you're aware, that's not the case. We kind of get on the back end. So I would say that if there was, in terms of a use of resources, it would be to train up the agencies themselves and the procurement officers themselves with these agencies. That would make our jobs a lot easier to get things right on the front end. And I know that there's a requirement for modules, and I won't get into the specifics of it, but I think a government-focused type of procurement module would be beneficial instead of a more theoretical procurement course. So I'm just, again, plugging that as a nuts and bolts government procurement emphasis.
Yeah, I agree with that. Is there any, I guess, efforts to do that as far as putting together, or maybe you have done that already? If you can maybe explain what steps have you done to kind of create this module for the government to maybe facilitate these procurement?
I believe in the past, Deputy Attorneys General Nishihira and Espadon have done a 2-day procurement course. We haven't offered it recently because we're the public health emergency, but that's something that we are wanting to do. But I'm referring to the requirements to get certified. You have to complete so many modules, and I don't, it's one of those things where you can kind of go to class to law school and not know how to do nuts and bolts legal practice. I think there's a similar concern where you can be procurement certified, but in terms of the nuts and bolts of procurement, not be as familiar. And that's something, again, that if the agencies are more robust in their training on nuts and bolts, and we can assist in that, it's just we need to figure out a very accessible way. Asking for staff to spend 2 days to spend with our office is a bit of a requirement, but that's something that we are looking at, offering hopefully soon.
Thank you. And so you said you engage in 350 procurements. Do you expect that to grow with the coming federal funding?
It's very difficult to predict. I'd say with CARES Act, we had a few, not necessarily procurement, but projects that our procurement team was assisting in. The daycares was one. I know that was a big one that we were working very closely with the Department of Public Health and Social Services. So it's really going to depend on how those funds are spent because we only, again, are required to assist in procurement above $500,000. So most of the procurement is not going to reach that threshold.
Okay, I think maybe just maybe a couple more questions. So in looking at the budget, there was a reduction in about 22 classified positions and an additional 2 unclassified positions, but there was an increase in salaries and benefits. And I know you're also doing a lot of infrastructure upgrades, changes to the IT. So is there a correlation between that?
Yes, so I know one of the issues of last year's budget hearing was we now have a case management software system for our civil litigation division. We have moved most of our office to G Suites. I believe child support division has unique requirements because they deal with taxpayer information, but I think we're clear for them to move as well. So a lot of last year and this year we're looking forward to building out our tech infrastructure. In terms of the number of employees, I think we've been pretty consistent in around 195 to 200 employees. That might have been, we've eliminated a lot of vacancies over the last few fiscal years in our requests, and we're kind of sticking with our FY22 request is essentially warm bodies and 2 vacancies.
Well, thank you for the responses, and yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Perez. And with that, there being no other questions, excuse me, Senator Titagui, you have a follow-up question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity again. I just came up, there's a couple of things that came up I'd like to ask about that I totally forgot, and that was the Guam Claims Act. Do you know the balance of that account for the Guam Claims Act?
The Guam Claims Act?
Fund, yes.
I don't know if that's housed with our office, but we can get that.
Okay, but it's your office that, basically awards, those claims that are made, right? I mean, there's a process that you go in negotiating, arbitrating between the two, and so I'm just curious to find out if, now that it's been increased, the amount has been increased to 500,000, 300,000, 200,000, 500,000. Is it your office that requests for how much funding is needed for that account, or is it DOA?
I believe, again, we review the claims themselves, but in terms of payout, that's a DOA function, and ultimately it is approved by the governor.
Good, Fred? Yeah.
Oh, and in addition to that, there is a provision if there is settlement, they come to the legislature. So generally, the agency themselves would also have or request for funding if there is a outstanding lawsuit or a settlement of a government claim. So that we may be part of the settlement, but we do not manage that fund.
Okay, so you guys don't even request, like, considering, I mean, last time we talked about the Guam Claims Act, when I had you in a public hearing, I mean, you had the balances, and you know how many cases are pending, and the awards that are coming out. You had a real depth of information when it comes to that account. So I'm just curious if you have any suggested amount that should be placed in that account now that it's increased, or the amount of the awards are increased now. Before it was like 40 years, it was 100, 300. Now we finally increase those amounts.
We receive the claims, and we do represent the agencies, but in terms of the management of the fund, but we can get the numbers of claims that have been filed and the amounts.
If you could, just send it to the Oversight Chair and then CC me. I appreciate it, to find out what the balance is on that one. Also, I noticed too on the Guam Community Outreach, you know, the list that was provided to us from, well, this was questions from Speaker Chalahi to you, and it had a legal service fee. And then I was noticing on the back, the last one is the Guam Community Outreach Federal Programs Office. And so you have a designated attorney for this particular agency, or actually it's not even an agency because it's under the governor's office.
We have staff who are partially funded by federal funds, which are handled by the governor's office, yes.
You have staff, I'm sorry, the muffling is so bad.
We have, as an example, they have a federal grant for sexual assault, and that will partially pay for the salary and benefits of an attorney and a staff. Or we have another federal grant for the prosecution of family violence cases, and that will partially fund an attorney and a staff at our office.
It says here that on January 2nd, 2021 to March 13th, 2021, $24,084 was paid to the Attorney General's office?
Yes.
Okay. So they have funding to pay for an attorney, is what that's what I'm looking at.
That's a grant for family
Grant.
violence.
Okay, but they have funding to pay for an attorney, right, is what you're...
Yeah, so
Okay.
they administer the grant, and they've awarded us salary and benefits for an attorney, yes. But they don't report or work for the agency. That office just handles the grants for the governor's office.
Okay, so in other words, it's just a grant given to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General doesn't do any work for them.
Part of the grant is the money has to be spent to prosecute family violence cases.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay, thank you so much for that explanation. The other one I have is, even though you didn't ask for art funding or you don't anticipate it, well, I didn't say you didn't ask, you just said you didn't anticipating any art funding coming your way, but did you ask?
We appreciate the legislature because one of the things that the APOSI system, the initial request and estimate was that it's going to be $10 million to migrate the system. We used our carryover from FY19 to fund phase 1, which is 1.2 million. And I believe that the 4 million, if we can get that system fully moved off, we would love it. And I know that was one of the items that was sent to the governor to consider in spending ARP funds. But in terms of asking, we haven't asked the governor's office directly for any funding. I know that there have been some discussions to assist public health with an attorney, but that's pretty much it.
You should ask. You're not going to get it if you don't ask. So, well, maybe you might, but it doesn't hurt to ask for that additional funding. Also, going back to the medical examiner, do you anticipate a cost in posting for this position? Because I know that you're doing this off island, you know, you're doing it in the States, you're posting this job opening for the medical examiner. Is there a cost for that?
Yes, it is, and it's currently being paid out of the medical examiner's budget within their current fiscal year funds.
And it's out of the medical examiner's budget, which is under your office, correct?
No.
See, this is what I'm confused because we had the hospital here, and they said the medical examiner is under the Attorney General's office. So now we have you in front of us today, and now you're saying it's not under your office, it's under the Guam Memorial. So
it's not under Guam Memorial, it's actually its own office.
I'm sorry?
It's its own office. It doesn't fall under the hospital either.
Office.
I believe their budget is around, normally they ask $600,000 per year.
But right now there's nobody in there, Levin. I mean, there's nobody there, and I know you're aggressively trying to assist the medical examiner's office by trying to get that position filled by posting these job call-outs in the States. And so my question is, the funding for that, do you have any funding for it? And do you still have a big hold on that office?
I believe there is funds within the medical examiner's office's current budget to post the announcement. But I can confirm with their staff there.
Okay.
I just signed off on the request to move funds to cover the cost of publishing it on the website.
So you sign off on all the requests that come out of the medical examiner's office. So in other words, you have the last say, right, on what goes out?
Only out of necessity because because I'm the chairperson for the postmortem commission, and DOA requires some appointing authority to sign off on some of this paperwork. But typically that would be handled by the chief medical examiner who would lead that office. It's just in the interim, I'm handling those duties.
Right, because we don't have one, right?
Correct.
So technically you are overseeing the agency, really. Okay, I'll call them today or ask them about this, how their process is through. So it's just a little bit confusing when one is throwing to another. So, but I do want to say I'd like to give you kudos and accolades for the work you've done with the website that you put out. That was excellent. I mean, during the COVID, you provided so much great information on the CARES Act funding, and this was great, a great example for transparency. I appreciate, we had Office of Technology in here, just talking up how a great job you guys did on the website and providing all this information out there. So kudos for you for doing that, and I hope that it doesn't stop, especially with this recovery, the ARP funding that's coming out. I hope that you continue to put that kind of information out on your website on what's being spent, because it's obvious we're not getting anything from the governor's office right now with the intention of what that money goes to, except for the hospital and maybe a little bit to GVB. But that would be a very good thing to do, to continue that good work that the Attorney General's office is doing on transparency. So I greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Attorney General. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tydegui, and thank you to all of our colleagues today for the questions, and of course to the Attorney General's office, to your entire team. Thank you for being here today, sharing your presentation and answering the questions. With that, with being no more questions today, the committee will conclude this budget hearing, and the committee will continue to receive testimonies for the next few days. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations, and Housing, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. San Agustin at gmail.com or to the Office of Senator Joe San Agustin at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 South Marine Corps Drive, Tamaning, Guam, 96931. Sujus Masi for your attendance and participation in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. This budget hearing on Bill 55-36 COR relative to the Office of the Attorney General is now adjourned at 3:11 p.m.